You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you. I mean, which is it? You know his library.
I got nothing.
Welcome to Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast.
Okay, welcome back to Musing. Got my brother on the line.
How we doing?
Good. So part 2. We're back.
Spaghetti Incident Part 2.
No.
No, wait, that was last time.
That was actually not. I think we decided that wasn't too bad, right?
No,
okay.
I said the one thing I think I got out of that was I appreciated their first album more.
Yeah, I think everybody.
I don't think I got what I was supposed to get out of Chinese Democracy, but I did acquire somewhat more of an understanding at the very least that their first album really was that much better.
Well, and that you're right, like you said, I think they were a small niche, unfortunately, in time. But yeah. I think that's where I was confused, and I didn't even mention it last week, but I'll jump out with saying that Sepultura's Arise was what the album that you gave me, and I think that's why I was confused about the one you gave me, because yeah, it's a lot harder than what I listened to. I mean, probably 20 on a scale of 1 to 10 of what I listened to.
Well, I wanted to not necessarily. There aren't a whole. Chinese Democracy is kind of an anomaly. There's not like a. There's
comparison.
Nothing to compare that to.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a, an obvious choice. Me giving you something was a little bit more challenging. I mean, I went from everything from, full on rap album or something, trying to find something, but I don't think that was the point. I think it was trying to step out of our comfort zone and, like your words were, try to find something you can appreciate from the album.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I did. And so to give my background, just a slight background of music for me is I don't listen to this kind of music on a regular basis. But if it's on, I'm not jumping to the radio to change it. And I'm aware of the band. I'm aware of their music. I've heard one or two of their songs in passing. So it's not like it was way outside of my comfort level.
Right. Well, I guess that would be same for Guns N' Roses with me.
Yeah, especially when I went back and listened to the Chinese Democracy again. I think that's what spurred it on. Is one of the songs came up in a, I think I talked about this, that one of the songs came up in a either Pandora mix or a Spotify mix, and I went back and revisited it, and I didn't remember it being as palatable as I felt it was. And I think that's what kind of spurred on this idea. So flip the script. Me listening to Arise from Sepultura was a ride. I mean, they're so again, being aware of who they are and the genre that they're in of metal.
Right.
I'm the type of person that compares. I'm the type of person that listens to a song or an album and goes, what does this remind me of? And I think that's just me and the way I learn. And I basically went a straight run through. I started with one, went all the way to the end without doing anything. No notes, no thinking about anything, just listening to it. It was hard for me because every time something would come up, I'd be like, I want to write that down. But I forced myself to just listen to it all the way through. I didn't even do any research before. I did research after, kind of just to, again, clear my head on it. And on second listen, I took notes on some songs, and I took notes on the album as an overall.
Right.
And then went and read on Wikipedia. And I think I'll jump right to the fun thing that jumped out to me when I looked up notes. That this was actually recorded at More Sound Studio in, well, it's technically Tampa, but what do they call it? It's not It's the little area between where we used to live in Tampa. Can't
Like
think what it's.
Seminole Heights, or what do you mean?
No, I can't, it's Anyways, it's listed as Tampa. I have actually physically been in the front part of this studio.
Oh yeah.
Like when I was playing in a local band, Contrast in Lakeland, we actually wanted to see what it would take to get recorded, professionally, and see kind of what it costs and stuff was. So we actually went to Morrisound, talked to them, got some prices, and talked to a guy who was a producer mixer and had a really good talk with that guy. So I've physically been in this studio. So looking at that and seeing them, they're a Brazilian band. They decided to come to Morrisound to record because the guy who was producing them and engineering them in Brazil, from Brazil, wanted them to come to his studio. And the label actually gave them a lot of money on this one, so the production value was a lot higher than their older stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that was
$40,000.
Yeah, like a real budget for an album. And even in Wikipedia it says it shows, and I agree. I think that
which was a lot of money. 91. I mean, $40,000 for an album in 91. That was especially for a thrash metal band. I mean, that was a huge budget, really.
And I think not only does it show for people like me who's not really into that type of music, but for people that were fans, it was a big leap.
Yeah, because that was like their third or fourth album? Fourth? I think it was their fourth.
Beneath the Remains was before it. Schizophrenia was before it. Morbid Visions was before it. Betrayal, Devastation, that was it. So, fifth?
Fourth or fifth, okay.
Yeah,
I knew it was well into their recording career.
So, I'll kind of start off by saying that, again, I do comparisons. So, for me, this felt it was almost ahead of its time. Like, there was a lot of stuff on there that sounded like Nine Inch Nails, Korn, Marilyn Manson, stuff that kind of hit heavy towards the late 90s and mid to late 90s. So I really felt they were almost a little ahead of their time. Now, I know that those other bands were kind of forming and getting a sound out there, so maybe they were influenced. In fact, I think they even said at one point in time that they'd been listening to a lot of they said they were listening to a lot of Ministry at the time.
Oh yeah.
So that bled through for me, like almost instantly. In fact, right out of the gate, the first song, the title track, Arise, right out of the gate was like, wow, this is Motorhead and Ministry all in one song. And I was really impressed with that idea. That even his vocals kind of mimicked Lemmy a little bit in that song, and I'm like, wow, I'm in for a ride, because again, this music isn't the stuff I listen to normally, but wow, it was definitely grabbing me.
Right.
It was also very more tribal than I was expecting.
See, that's what they used a lot of that the tribal drumming techniques. And if you go back to like Roots, Bloody Roots, and a couple of their earlier albums, that was always prevalent. I think that was the Brazilian influence, or the
that could be
and I always get the brothers confused, which one was the drummer, which one was the singer. But when I first heard them, Roots, Bloody Roots was like the first song I heard from them. I'm like, wow, this is crazy, because unlike you, I mean, this is the side that I swing to,
Right.
I'm more of the heavier side of, I mean, I love music in general, but I always, especially in my youth, I mean, like mid 80s, and I think we've been over this in earlier podcasts too, that, I mean, like 86 or 87, when I first heard Anthrax, I was like, wow, that galloping guitar and the double kick bass drum, and I was just, mesmerized. I'm like, wow, how do they do that? How do they get that sound? How do they play so fast? And then, I, branched into the Metallicas and then, early 90s, Pantera, and it just progressively got, how far can this go? I mean, I didn't I really didn't realize that some of this music was possible. And in early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I think Arise came out in 91, was the pinnacle of my metal listening prowess. I mean, I was ingesting everything like this. And I saw I think it was 88 or 89, I saw Anthrax, Exodus, and Halloween here in Tampa, and I was blown away because that was literally my first concert experience. I was 14 or 15 years old, and I was blown away that, wow, they really can do that. To see it live was even more intense. And, bands like Anthrax and Exodus that, paved the way, Metal Church. Some of these bands, Metal Church was early 80s, probably 10 years prior to this album. They're that really, really heavy drum and really crunchy speed guitar and, what is now deemed thrash metal is where I found my home. This is where the sweet spot on the bat was. I just couldn't get enough of it. And after seeing Anthrax, I went and I picked my head up. I looked around because I was, Anthrax only. And when I looked around, I saw that there was a lot of bands like that. And again, that was late 80s, early 90s. And right when this album came out, I was mesmerized, and because of the production quality, because if you listen to Roots, Bloody Roots, and you listen to,
Arise Forward, basically.
Yeah, anything off of this album, it's monumentally different. It's the same band, same sound, but it's monumentally different because of what you mentioned earlier, the production value. When you actually have a quality producer, a quality mixer, a quality sound guy, and you can actually take more than 4 minutes in the studio to, jam as many songs, because they experimented with drum sound and microphone placement and everything else on this album. It really shows. And whether you like the sound or whether you like this type of music or not, the sound is, if you can't appreciate the sound being so much different than literally a lot of other thrash albums that were out in that time frame, 89 to say 93 even.
And I think that's one of the reasons I've avoided both the band and this album for so long. And to put my perspective on the time frame, shortly before that, I had listened to Appetite for Destruction, and Appetite for Destruction is what got me wanting to play guitar. But also through that, Appetite for Destruction also got me revisiting the 60s, 70s, 80s rock. Right. And going back and listening at what influenced them, what put them on the map. So I was pretty distanced from this. And unfortunately, I also lumped Sepultura up with Obituary and, take a disgusting word and throw it on an album, and that's right. No, so
I get you.
Roadrunner Records,
Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah, there you go. If you see Roadrunner Records on an album, it's that's not for me. That's where I want to avoid that whole area. So I think it got sucked up in that both me pushing older to listen to see where things came from, and me looking at the group that it was in and going, I actually looked up Roadrunner Records to see what was on there. You have Opeth, you have Gore Guts, you have but you also have people like Rob Zombie,
really disgusting bands. Oh,
Right. But no, yeah, you're right. I can't argue that, but
you're not wrong.
No, you're not wrong. But I think again, it was timing for me, and timing for me on music. I was really far from it.
Right.
So I'm really glad I actually went back to this, because one line stuck out to me in the entire Wikipedia page, which was, throughout the years, Arise has been continuously praised by the music press, not only as a landmark release of Sepultura's career, but of extreme metal in general.
Yeah.
And I'm like, honestly, though, I didn't get that. Like, if I listened to any of those bands I mentioned, that Gore Guts or Cannibal Corpse, I don't hear anything that's for me.
Right.
I do hear stuff for me on this, but when people talk about critically acclaimed albums, I feel like there's a lot more to it. And I don't feel let down. I just feel like, did I miss something in this?
I don't think you missed something. I think that's just based on your musical prowess, like what you like or don't like.
Yeah, but going back to what you said, I also respect it, because I'll kind of go down the list, and a couple songs that stood out to me. Obviously, the theme, or the title track, was very Motorhead. I actually like that one quite a bit.
Arise is
good song, very good song, very good lyrics, very good vocalist, very good music. It was all well-rounded song for me. The other song that stood out for me on this album was Old Earth, and I don't know if it was just close enough to traditional that I felt, akin to it, but I think that's the one that mainly stood out for me.
Right.
Floaters in the Mid was very prog feeling. The lead guitar was very Dream Theater-ish feeling in it. Very, I don't want to say melodic, but it also reminded me of another band I listened to called High on Fire, which I think the vocals really much reminded me of that. But the music in this one was very, very progressive rock feeling, very forward thinking in their sound, but also kind of what was in the time. I mean, that was a time when, Queensryche and
right.
Who did I just mention a second ago?
Motorhead.
Yeah, I mean, those bands were kind of on an uprise at that point.
Right. Right.
Go ahead.
No, was that, those are the couple songs that stood out to you, or?
Oh no. FOE is on it as well.
Right.
I love the intro music in that one. And the singer also varied his delivery a lot more in this song than a lot of the others. I think pretty much any of the other songs on the entire album.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's also what I look for. Or let me flip that. I think it's what I don't look for in thrash metal or metal music is I like to hear them sing. And
right.
You don't get a lot of that in that type of music. And I think that's why, you always go back to Anthrax as your home band, and I like them too, because it was metal, but it was melodic. I mean, he had an amazing voice, and he had a good range, and he used that range.
Right.
So, good.
Well, I think the difference to me with Sepultura was, even though, I mean, he's, borderline growler or however, whatever you term those, gravel voice. Screamo type music, if you want to put it in that, yeah. Well, he's definitely a lower range, but
yeah, very
few of those low, growler types, they're very, very difficult to understand. And I'm not even going to argue that fact. You can't understand what he's saying. Everybody, that used to be my argument in high school and shortly after between metal and country music. You can't understand what he's saying. Well, that's the difference, because country music, I don't want to understand what he's saying, but I can. So that was always my joke, my response argument. But with this, it is different. There's some of it, I mean, I wouldn't say a lot of it. Some of it, it's difficult, but I think that's the Brazilian part. I think that's the accent part, the hard to, hard to translate part.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, he is a little more melodic than a lot of his peers in that time frame, but again, that barrier of language might be the issue, might have been what I got out of it, but I think honestly, I mentioned it earlier, but I'm gonna kind of reiterate it. I think they really pulled from the best of the '90s rock metal genre and actually foresaw the future of where this type of music was going. Because there's songs on here where I could have listened to it like on the Matrix soundtrack and been like, that's a new song. Yeah, 99. This could have been a new song in '99, and I would have not even thought twice about it.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was some of the. I mean, I don't know how deep you looked. Did you catch the European edition, the bonus track that's on the European edition?
So let's talk about that, because that's okay. That's really. So one of the last comments I made was that there was a lot of world beat stuff, and I appreciated that quite a bit, because it's so hard to take two genres and put them together and make it work.
Yeah.
And, they did a lot of that in the 90s with rap and rock, but to take something world beat or Latin beat and put it into metal was like, there's no way this is going to come off anywhere close to good. But it did. It actually fit for me. But one of the last comments I also made was it was kind of a letdown that there was not any melodic reprieve. There was no, hey, this one song actually is them just acoustic guitars, or, kind of,
well, that's not really kind of in the wheelhouse there for thrash metal.
I know that, but I always expect them to do something gimmicky to, I don't know, to push it in a different direction, just to give the listeners a different taste of who they are. And usually when I hear critically acclaimed band or critically acclaimed album, that's kind of what I expect, is something that stood out, was a little off the beaten path of the band itself, and also brings me kind of into a different part of their world. Like, maybe they do like country music, and this is kind of their tribute to it. Just throwing that out there. But so I was a little let down that there wasn't something almost classic rock or melodic or something slowed down, or you could, maybe showcase his voice or something. But
well, I said the disappointing part is they didn't put the Motorhead cover on the on the American edition. That's I guess I always thought that was, because I always listen to that as, I mean, I'm a Motorhead fan. I'm not crazy about them. I'm not anti. But it is definitely a unique process.
Yeah, and I think I'll get to the Motorhead cover in a second, but where I was going with that was this Desperate Cry was what I was looking for on the album.
Right.
It was a lot more melodic. It was a lot more traditional sounding for rock, and I really would that would have sealed this album for me. That song on that album would have basically said, "Yep, this is exactly what they said it is." It's not my cup of tea, but man, this album had everything. It had everything it needed.
See, Desperate Cry, that actually got radio play here in Tampa in the early 90s, and that's kind of what triggered me to them a little bit. And listening to that, I wanted to see what the difference was. And, when you go to like Under Siege or Infected Voice, then it's different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
and I think, like you just started to say, I think that difference, that melodic difference, they actually made something. Let's face it, there are very few thrash metal bands that get radio play.
Right.
And they're okay with that. I mean, they know that's the the penance they pay for,
Yeah.
being a thrash metal band. I mean, there's a lot more acceptance nowadays, but I mean, it's touring. You're in, whatever, Rock in Rio playing to 70,000 people. You don't really give a crap, if you get radio play. To me, I wouldn't say, disappointing, because obviously I wouldn't even say it's an acquired taste. It's, you either like it or you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, there's versions of that. You can say, well, I'm not turning it off, but it's not. You don't wake up on Sunday morning, get your coffee, and turn on Sepultura. I mean, let's be realistic.
You do, but
well,
I
don't. Okay, most people don't.
No, and I think that's kind of where I was going with it, though, is that you're right. I don't put this on every day. I don't seek to go, today's an Arise Day, I'm going to listen to this. Right. But that made this album, it made it round. Well, let me rephrase that. This and the Orgasmatron Motorhead cover made this album round. No, seriously. Yeah. And I, we have our likes and dislikes, and I know that, and I know that I'm not, I am kind of narrow sometimes when I look at the type of music or the bands I listen to and stuff, but I also look for a method that they use on albums, and
right.
A lot of times some of the standout albums have a cover song on it. And right. It might be an unknown song. It might be something that you don't hear very often. It might be something that I've never heard. And I go, wow, that's a really good song. And then I look it up and go, wow, that's not even their song. Yeah. But it rounds out an album for me. Right. Hearing them take something from their past or their love and turning it into a cover song. And when I saw that it was on there, I actually stopped at that point in my first listen through and went and listened to the original. And they're different. They're different enough.
Oh yeah.
I think we're gonna revisit the covers episode at some point and redo that. And I'm sure we're gonna talk about the Toto cover that Weezer's done recently.
If we have to.
Yeah, well, it'll be very brief because there's really not much of a comparison. It's almost the same exact song, a little heavier. But when I take Sepultura's version of Orgasmatron and listen to Motorhead's version, it is a lot heavier. and I think they not only paid tribute but also made it their own.
But you compared them to Motorhead, like right out of the box. And
I was shocked.
That's why I asked if you saw it's only on the European edition.
I didn't see that until, because again I went through the traditional album. I didn't look at any bonus albums. I didn't see that at all.
Right.
Because again, I didn't want to do any research. I wanted to listen to it straight. So when I got to the European version, I went, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So
see, that's where I never I don't know how to put it. I never I don't pick Motorhead as, but I mean, if you read the Wikipedia, I mean, that was one of their big influences, Motorhead, 9 Inch Nails, and so on and so forth. That's a big deal. And again, I mean, Motorhead to me always seemed like a one-trick pony. I mean, you can pick 8 out of 10 songs that, I mean, yep, that's Motorhead. I mean, there's very little variance.
Right.
And what you started to say about your, listening habits being narrow, I disagree to a certain extent, because there's never at least you're open to listen to albums like Arise by Sepultura. And whether you like it or not, it's different. Just like I went in with, I tried to have an open mind on Chinese Democracy. I mean, I did. I'm like, you know what? Take a deep breath. I mean, I can stomach Appetite for Destruction. Some of their, covers, I thought that was kind of cool that they did some really odd covers on the Spaghetti Incident.
Mm-hmm.
And like, nah, and our our guest speaker did a rant recently about songs if you never hear again.
On the radio.
Guns N' Roses' November Rain I would have to put right close to the top of my list.
He actually had one Guns N' Roses song on there.
I know.
Which, not the one I was expecting, but yeah, it's.
I know, and I mean, you could pick one. November Rain is on the top of my list, but anyway, all that being said, I tried to go into it with an open mind and listen, just like, when we started this weeks ago. You gave me the, Chinese Democracy, and I gave you Arise by Sepultura, and we had to listen to these albums, give them a fair shake, find something that we at least appreciated, if not liked, on the albums, was the goal. It was extremely difficult by comparison for Chinese Democracy, because I, not really being a huge Guns N' Roses fan, found very little to tie Guns N' Roses to that, because Axl didn't really sound like Axl on any of the other albums as he did, and Chinese Democracy was very, very different. I don't know if it's the years, the booze, the cigarettes, or whatever, or the madness that caught up to him, but the vocals just weren't there. Yeah. I mean, he's got an amazing range. I mean, for that kind of singer he had. And it was disappointing as much as anything, but the arrangement was, I got very little good out of it other than, wow, they probably should have released that 10 years ago, or 10 years before they actually released it. But this one, I was not necessarily hoping that you would find something good in it, but that you would see that some of these thrash metal albums can be melodic. They can be not so hard to listen to. It's not like you're going to wake up on a Sunday morning and listen to it over coffee, but there is a difference to some of these. And why I picked Arise was because of the production value and because it was critically acclaimed, even at the time. I mean, it went platinum, and for a thrash metal band, if, they still consider Metallica and, bands of that nature, thrash metal. So,
well, and their early stuff,
sure,
was on the fringe of that.
Right. But this album I think US charts only went to like 60.
Yeah. I think this was I think they said it was their first one that actually hit the chart, right?
Right. And that's, and 60s, like on the top 100, let's be honest, that's an F. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Not really, it's not like you're, but for a thrash album to actually make the Billboard charts and in the early 90s, when look at that landscape, Michael Jackson, that's dominating radio, that's dominating music, that's dominating the charts, dominating Billboard. There's in 1991, if you've got your computer up, you should Google like albums that came out in 1991, or popular albums released in 91 or something to that effect, and just see what the musical landscape was. And for a serious thrash metal band, I'm not talking like, wow. Metallica in 91, the Black Album came out, right? They had Nothing Else Matters. It was whiny, it was melodic, it was acoustic, and it was, let's play the piss out of that on radio.
You way underestimated what albums came out in 91.
That's what I'm talking about. You listen to Arise, that's not radio play.
No.
And for that to even make it on the charts was impressive. To get radio play was even more impressive.
And I think that's where I'll kind of go the bad side of what I felt about this album is I expected more out of it to be one of the first thrash metal albums to make the charts. I expected to be blown away. And again, whether it's the music I listen to or not, I can appreciate what bands have put together, even country music. I can appreciate if they put together a great album.
Absolutely.
What's the famous Garth album? Is it Thunder Rolls? Is that the name of the album?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you. I mean, which is it? You know his library.
I got nothing. Somebody had a gun to my head, they would have to pull the trigger because I got nothing.
I gotta look and see. I think it was just Garth Brooks, the name of it. No Offenses was the one that had like all the big hits off of it.
I will take your word for it.
But again, I can listen to that album as an outsider and somebody who doesn't like country, but I can hear everything that's in that album that makes it so good. I can say, yep, that's why this album is really good. I don't like country, but that's exactly why this album is really good. And I just didn't feel that with this album. Again, I didn't say I disliked the music or disliked the feel of it.
Right.
I actually grew a new appreciation for Sepultura, but I just didn't feel that critically acclaimed album
That's valid. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to. I mean, whatever your feelings are just that. I agree to a certain extent. I'm just, if you take the personal feelings out of it, how monumental it was,
right?
Whether you got that much out of it or not, to like I said, what came out in '91,
right?
To make the charts, to make radio play as that heavy and that thrash metal style, it was impressive.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with that. Is I think through this, I'm going to go listen to the previous albums and everything they put out, not everything, but the couple they put out after, and get me more of a comparison of what it was. But I think in looking at what was out at the time, because again, I went back afterwards and did that, and I couldn't remember exactly which ones were on there. I remember 2 of them, but I just pulled it up again, and Nevermind came out in 91. 10 came out in 91.
The Black Album came out in 91.
Octung Baby came out in 91. Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out in 81 or 91. I mean,
wow, that's even more than I thought.
That's what I said. I had remembered the Nirvana and Pearl Jam had come out that year as well, and that again kind of made it a little more clear to me. But I think I'm going to go back and listen to their other albums in comparison. Out of Time by R.E.M., Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden came out.
Wow.
Use Your Illusion 2 came out in 91. Okay? I mean, hate it or not, Dangerous by Michael Jackson came out in 91.
And that's what I was talking about.
Gish.
91. Wow.
Gish by Smashing Pumpkins came out in 91. Whether you're a fan or not, the Trompe Le Monde by the Pixies came out.
Wow.
Temple of the Dog was released. Wow. Yeah, I mean.
So that's almost border. I mean, you're talking monumental albums by monumental bands that came out that year, and Sepultura found a way to make a statement.
Sailing the Seas of Cheese.
Oh, Primus. Yes. I will fight anybody for that's the best Primus album ever made.
Look, Girlfriend by Matthew Sweet. Whether you're a Matthew Sweet fan or not, that was his pinnacle.
Oh, that you couldn't turn on the radio without hearing that song.
Green Mine by Dinosaur Jr., kind of one of their pinnacle albums at the time. I just looking through to see if there's anything else that stands out. De La Soul. I mean,
Well, I mean,
Into the Great Wide Open, Tom Petty.
Wow, really? See, that to me, that solidifies how important Arise was. And I'm not this big proponent for Sepultura and you have to listen to them or whatever. I tried to pick something that was kind of on the radar, but not maybe unsure of. Yeah. As much as I know, or much as I listen to it, or much as I know about that time frame in music, I really didn't know all of those. That's epic, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's next level of holy crap. There's a lot of huge artists and bands released huge, epic albums.
And I think, I think the exercise worked is all I'm going to say.
Absolutely.
I think that I experienced something that I was shied away from for a long time. And again, it was just timing when a lot of that stuff come out. So I think the experiment was exactly what it was supposed to be. It was me taking something that I had not heard before and that I don't technically is not in my wheelhouse, and give it a chance. And I did. And again, I liked it. It was actually, oh man, The Sky is Crying by Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble came out in 91.
Shut up.
Kerplunk by Green Day. But I think seriously though, I think it was a huge success. I've definitely added something to my repertoire of listening that is not going to go away. That album's going to come up for me on a semi-regular basis. It's going to be something I'm going to listen to for two reasons. One, because I kind of grew an affinity for them, period, for the band itself, especially as reading through their history. And two, because I actually liked it. I actually liked some of the songs off of it. I mean, they aren't something I normally listen to, but they were good songs. They were well written. They were well produced, which again we talked about that.
Right.
And there was some, especially like Desperate Cry. I could probably put that on my rotation and not even think twice about it.
Oh, that's a great song. Yeah.
No More Tears by Ozzy Osbourne. I'm sorry, this has got me totally intrigued right now. Hey Stupid by Alice Cooper.
Wow. Seal,
the title track album for Seal.
Right. So to even register on the charts,
I don't know how that even. They actually were listed as number 47, by the way, on this chart of top 100 from 91.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Cypress Hill.
Jeez.
Yeah. Wow. I'm telling you. Psychotic Supper by Tesla, which was kind of their downswing, but still released in 91. I'm still shocked. These were released in that same year.
See, I knew that was
Joyride by Roxette.
Yeah, see, I knew that was a big deal. I knew 91 there was a lot of big
Slave to the Grind by Skid Row.
See?
Still arguably their best album. You can argue all you want, but
their best song anyway. I love that song.
Quicksand Jesus was on that too, right?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure.
But anyway, yeah, it got, for me, the fact that a thrash metal band made that much progress in a sea of ridiculously good albums, I think was my point in all of this.
And
why I picked
it's
that album.
Well taken. It is certainly well taken. I was taken back, and again, I started this show out with why pick. It was almost like a softball for me. It was almost just lobbing something at me.
Right.
And then once I got into it, I'm like, he didn't lob this at me. This is taking on quite a bit to go through this and really kind of break it down and figure out what's good for me.
Yeah.
So it was. I'm still flipping through albums. I haven't made it to 100 yet, if you can believe that.
That's definitely well, again, I knew it was epic. I knew it was, a big year for music. And I think that was kind of why I picked that one out of, because.
So hold on, you reached out to me and said, I'm narrowing it down. And then the last time we spoke, it was, I'm going to pick between two.
Yeah.
What was
Mighty Boss Tones.
Oh, yeah, you did mention that. Which album?
Question the Answers.
I'll have to listen to that one too, just out of curiosity now. Last two I'm going to throw at you on the list. For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, Van Halen.
Oh, yeah, it's a great album.
And Sabotage, Streets, a rock opera. Speaking of Tampa, Florida.
Wow. See, I mean, early 90s was like, that was ground zero, apparently, for band, huge bands.
Well, and
huge albums anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Kerplunk was obviously Green Day's first album. But if you look at Nirvana, obviously that was their second album, but still the biggest album they hit. Yeah. Pearl Jam's first album. So you're right. It was really kind of a red letter year for albums that really hit hard. It could have been the times. I mean, it could have been, you were moving kind of away from actual physical albums, and CDs were starting to take off. That the new technology was starting to come up, and maybe that's what having easier access to the music might be part of why a lot of those things hit really big that time. And it might have been why this one actually got on the charts, because people were going out and going, I don't have to buy a cassette or a physical album. I don't have to flip this cassette over. I can put a CD on and listen to the whole thing.
Yeah,
I like Sepultura anyways.
Skip right back to it. Skip that. Keep replaying that song. Yeah.
So maybe that also played into it. But
that's possible.
The
technology catching up a little bit.
But I'd say again, huge success. Happy with going through this. I think it was, we did actually get a fan email come to us that was very detailed about our actors and musicians episode, and
yes,
it was enlightening, and it was also I don't want to say depressing, but it kind of put what we do in a weird light. He mentioned a lot of stuff that we quote unquote missed,
right?
And we try and keep this to 30, 45, 55, maybe an hour recordings. I mean, we started out kind of low with 35, 40. But we try and keep them around 45, 50 minutes just to kind of not take up too much mind space, but at least get people something fun to listen to, and hopefully that, if they like this type of music, they can get into it. But that was one of his big complaints, was that, we missed a lot of stuff. Well, unfortunately, we were going to miss a lot of stuff because of just the time frame.
Right.
The
time allotted, anyway.
Right, the time allotted, and it's self-imposed, because there were times where I'd call on the ride home, and my trip home was an hour and 45 minutes, and we talked from start to finish, and we still weren't finished with the conversation we had.
Yeah.
And we talked about splitting them up into two different ones and doing two-parters, and I kind of think this one turned into that only because of how good it turned out. In my mind, it was like, we're going to be able to put both these on one episode and talk about it. We got done with Chinese Democracy. I'm like, man, that was fun. And we had a whole episode out of one. We got a two-parter. So right. I don't know. Well, maybe we'll visit that in the future. But, as we always say, as the trailer says here at the end, send us emails. Send us, musingfeedback@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Send us what you think. What do you like? What don't you like? Was this album really, essential in your listening, and what made you feel good about it? I'd love to hear it.
Right.
You tell me, George, you tell me what you love about it, and I hear that. And I know that you've listened to it on a regular basis, but somebody else might find something different about it that appeals to me and
right.
go, hey, maybe you should listen to it with this idea in mind or something like that. So
absolutely.
So yeah, good episode again. I appreciate it. We'll be around in a couple of weeks, and we'll have a new subject to talk about. But if you guys have anything, throw it at us. Throw some ideas at us.
Yep, that's what we're here for.
Yep, and I'll catch up to you in a couple of weeks, brother.
All right, bro. Talk to you later.
Yep, see ya.
See ya.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, Sybert.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.